What's up, RotoBallers? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jorden Hill. There are no teams on bye in Week 8, but there are still plenty of injuries and matchups to navigate, so hopefully I'll be able to help you set those fantasy lineups as we take a look at RotoBaller's consensus half PPR rankings for Sunday and Monday's games. As always, I'll point out a few players along the way that stand out to me the most. Let's start things off at the quarterback position with our number 11, Kirk Cousins. Cousins has been great for fantasy this year, averaging over 19 fantasy points per game, and if there was a matchup you would have benched him in, it may have been last week without Justin Jefferson against the San Francisco 49ers in primetime. But Cousins delivered with 378 passing yards and 2 touchdowns as Jordan Addison looks like a future star. He'll draw another tough matchup this week against the Green Bay Packers, who are surrendering the 9th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. But Minnesota is throwing the ball on average of 40 times per game, so we still think you can have confidence in Cousins as a QB1. Moving up to number 7, we have CJ Stroud. The rookie has looked really good to start his NFL career with 9 touchdowns to just 1 interception so far on the season, and he'll face fellow rookie quarterback Bryce Young in Carolina on Sunday. The Panthers have been middle of the pack against fantasy QBs and are actually allowing a lot more production to running backs, but the Texans are throwing the ball a lot, and Stroud should still be able to find success, especially with rookie receiver Tank Dell back in the mix. And up at number 2, we have Lamar Jackson, who absolutely diced up the Detroit Lions last week for 393 total yards and 4 total touchdowns. We think he'll keep it going this week against the Cardinals, who are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to opposing QBs. Jackson has been a must-start fantasy asset for years now due to his rushing upside, but he's really excelling as a passer this season, and in this matchup, could just be the number 1 option on the week. Taking a look at our running back rankings, at number 12 we have Jonathan Taylor. Since his long-awaited return in Week 5, the Colts have slowly been ramping up Taylor's workload, and last week he split snaps evenly with Zach Moss. Although the two handled the same amount of carries, Taylor was the preferred receiving option out of the backfield and came through with 120 total yards and a touchdown against a tough Browns defense. Taylor will face an even more difficult opponent in the New Orleans Saints this week, but assuming the Colts are going to give him more touches as the season progresses, Taylor looks like a lineup lock going forward. Our 7th ranked running back this week is Isaiah Pacheco, who's currently the RB9 on the season, and he seems to have carved out a legitimate role for himself in the Chiefs' passing game, which is something we didn't really see from him a whole lot as a rookie. On Sunday, Pacheco will face the Denver Broncos, who have allowed the most fantasy points, the 2nd most receptions, and the 2nd most touchdowns to running backs this season. Pacheco did just play Denver 2 weeks ago, and although he didn't find the end zone, he still had over 90 total yards and 6 receptions, so he has a really safe floor this week and still offers a good bit of upside. Up 2 spots at number 5, we have Jahmyr Gibbs. In Week 7, Gibbs finally came through with the performance that fantasy managers had been waiting for, with 126 total yards, 9 receptions, and a touchdown against the Baltimore Ravens. Although David Montgomery hasn't yet been rolled out for Monday night's contest, he's not expected to suit up, so Gibbs should have the opportunity to be the lead back once again. This opportunity should be a great one against the Las Vegas Raiders, who surrender the 5th most fantasy points to running backs and allowed Deonta Foreman to find the end zone 3 times last week. Keep Gibbs in your lineup, he's a smash play on Monday night. At wide receiver, coming in at number 11, we have Adam Thielen. We talked about this duel between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud a little bit earlier, and it's important to note that the Texans have been stout against fantasy wideouts this season. They're yet to allow a receiver to reach 100 yards in a game. Still, Thielen has been far too important to this Carolina offense, which has minimal weapons if we're being honest, and he's averaging almost 10 targets per game as the wide receiver 7 on the year, so we still recommend starting him in all formats. At number 7, we have Davante Adams. Adams created a lot of buzz on the internet when he expressed frustration with his lack of involvement heading into Week 7, and he did receive 12 targets from Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell, but it didn't amount to a great showing, and he had an uncharacteristic drop in the end zone. He'll face the Lions on Monday night, who have been middle of the road against fantasy wide receivers, but stout against the run, so the Raiders might just have to rely on their passing attack. And perhaps more importantly, Jimmy Garoppolo is back practicing in a limited fashion, and the team is hopeful that he'll be able to suit up, so this looks like a really good get-right spot for Adams. All the way up at number 2, it's A.J. Brown, who's just been ridiculous lately, with 5 straight games of at least 125 receiving yards. Back in Week 4, he torched the Washington Commanders for 9 receptions, 175 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and he'll have the pleasure of taking them on again on Sunday. The Commanders allow the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers, but obviously you're starting Brown, so I just also want to take a quick second to mention Devonta Smith, who's been really quiet lately, but did post 7 receptions for 78 yards against the Commanders in Week 4, so I think you can have confidence in him again as a wide receiver 2 this week. Now taking a look at tight ends, let's talk about number 12, Taysom Hill. Hill has ventured in and out of fantasy relevance over the past few seasons, but he's been surprisingly involved as a receiver over the past 2 weeks, seeing a combined 13 targets in that span. He has been limited in practice this week with a chest injury, so that will definitely be worth monitoring heading into Sunday. It'll also be worth monitoring the status of Juwan Johnson, who's missed the past 4 weeks, but is also now practicing in a limited capacity. If both tight ends are active, Johnson could eat into the target share that Hill has been seeing, making him a dicier option. There are still sure to be packages specifically designed for Hill, and there's always the possibility that he gets a carry or 2 near the goal line. At number 8, we have Evan Ingram, who's been super consistent this season, earning at least 7 targets in 6 straight contests. He'll face his most difficult challenge yet on Sunday, though, against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points and only 1 touchdown to the tight end position. In the world of fantasy tight ends, there aren't many that see the guaranteed involvement that Ingram does, so you probably have to keep him in your lineup. Just temper your expectations a little bit. And finally, at number 7, we have Darren Waller. Waller had his best performance as a Giant last week with 7 receptions, 98 yards, and a touchdown. This, of course, was with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, and even though Daniel Jones may be back this week, Waller gets to face the New York Jets, who've surrendered the most fantasy points and the most touchdowns to tight ends, so you should have confidence deploying him regardless of who is under center. Hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to leave all your start-sit questions in the comment section down below. Also, please remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to RotoBaller for all the fantasy football content you need to help you win big in 2023. Thanks so much for tuning in, and best of luck in your Week 8 fantasy matchups.